Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to add a virtual attribute for use in the virtual identity server. But a couple things we want to make sure that we cover first before we go any further. And first off, that schema extensions are permanent. Now, we won't be modifying the schema in your Active Directory environment or your primary environment, but we will be modifying the schema in the virtual identity server's config data, which is our local ADLDS instance that we install by default. So, but keep in mind that even those schema extensions are permanent. So you want to make sure that you double check your work before you actually extend the schema. So we'll walk through that in just a second. Second thing you need to keep in mind is you need to come up with a good naming convention for any of your schema extensions. We'll talk about that, as well as defining an OID numbering convention too. I'll show you what that means. So just take good notes on what you add so you can replicate them to other environments, or oftentimes what we'll do is we'll take the schema extensions and we'll add them into an LDIF file so that we can import these schema extensions into any system in any environment we want to as we go further. Okay, so to start out, the first thing we want to do is pull up the Active Directory Schema snap-in. Now I know everyone's going to get scared because it's called the Active Directory Schema snap-in, but we use this snap-in to connect to the ADLDS instance. But note, by default it has connected to my domain controller, vis.optimalidm.local in this case. That's my domain controller. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say change Active Directory domain controller. So then we're going to come down here to the bottom where it says type in a directory server name and port. We're going to highlight it and we're going to type localhost and our port. Now my particular port is 55389, but yours by default most likely will be 50389. So you'll go ahead and hit enter, and it's going to come back and say the status is unavailable. That's normal. So we're going to say OK, and the first thing it's going to do is it's going to pop up and tell us that it's connecting to localhost and our port. And of course it will give us the GUID partition name. And if you're paranoid, like some folks may be, you can double check that this GUID matches what we have in our VIS system. So if we go into the VIS configuration and we go down to our visa sets, our system visa, we can see that our GUID 5425E, that does indeed match what we connected to. So we're going to go ahead and say yes. And another check, if we drill into that and look at the attributes and go down to the V's, you can see all of the VIS attributes that come when we install the product that we configure. So you know you're connecting for sure to our local ADLDS vizconfig instance. So first thing we're going to do here now is we're going to grab an OID from one of our existing attributes that we've installed. Now, if your company, your organization is already registered an official LDAP OID, you're more than welcome to use your own. Otherwise, Optimal IDM has registered this prefix name, so all of our schema extensions are registered with this number, and then we have a numbering convention after that. So all you need to do is grab this part of any existing of our attributes. I'm just going to copy that into my buffer. And then when we get ready to add the attribute, right click, say create attribute, and it's just warning us that it's permanent. I'm going to go into the OID field and paste. And what we have done for our customers is we have reserved a special name numbering convention past ours. So if you go 9999, then you can have your own numbering convention and still use our number. So for example, I'll go 9999 and I'll use one for, say, users, and then I'll say .1. Okay, so next thing I need to do is I need to actually give it an attribute name. So here's where you need to make sure that you have considered your naming conventions. I like to prefix our attributes with something special about my organization so that we don't step on attribute names from perhaps some other product that we may install in the future. So you'll notice all the VIS attributes are prefixed with VIS dash. So let's assume my organization is called ABC something or other. So I'm going to go ahead and prefix it with ABC dash my custom adder. If you want the dash, great. If you don't want the dash, it doesn't matter. It's really up to you. In this case, maybe we'll do without the dash. The next major thing you have to decide on is the data type that you're going to be storing. Now, in most cases, schema extensions, you're going to be storing some kind of string value, perhaps a distinguished name, and you do need to consider what type of characters you'll be storing in here if it is a string. So perhaps you need to use Unicode string. If you're going to store Unicode characters, you could also just take the case insensitive string. So I'm going to just select that one because that's easy. And then the last thing you need to decide here, and it's very important, is you need to understand that what data you're going to be storing in here, whether it's single valued or multi-valued attribute. So if you're going to allow multiple values in this one attribute, you need to make sure you check this box. If it's single valued, you don't have to check it. I'll leave it unchecked for now, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. That attribute has now officially been added, and here it is up at the top. So next step I have to do is I have to associate this attribute to an object class. We also provide a VIS user object class, and I'm also assuming that this attribute we're adding is an extension for the user object that we're going to use in VIS. Sorry, I didn't mention that. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the properties of our object class, and I'm not sure where that went to. There it is. And if we take a look at the attributes tab, you'll see some of our attributes that we've already extended, or at least I have in my environment. So I'm going to go ahead and add our new attribute, ABC my custom adder, say OK, click apply. Okay, not sure what that error was about, but now the last thing we need to do is we need to come back up to the very top of the schema snap-in. And of course my snap-in is not very happy. I have seen that before a few times, but not to worry. I don't think it lost any of my work. And in fact, it's still connected to my 55389. I'm going to right click and say reload the schema. It's an important step. We need to make sure that we've reloaded the schema cache here. Okay, so one final thing we need to work on here is associate this new attribute in our viz config system. Now you could use the ADSI edit snap-in tool, or you can connect directly to the viz config instance, which is what I've done in this case. So I'm going to drill down into the IdM folder, go down to schema extensions, and we already have a user object out here, which is where we hold our virtual schema extension. So you'll see these are all the attributes that have already been defined in the product to be virtual schemas. So all we have to do is right click in here and say add a new value to the existing attribute, and this value will be ABC my custom adder. We'll click save, and from a configuration standpoint, that's all we need to do. But we will check a few other things while we're here. So we're going to jump back into the configuration of VIS, look at the main instance, and we want to make sure that the enable virtual schema checkbox is checked. So now, since we've modified the schema, there's one final thing we need to do, which is to restart the VIS service so that it now can recognize that schema extension. So I'm going to go ahead and restart it, clear the trace file while I'm doing it. That restarts, and it has. I'll go back into LDAP Manager. I'll drill into the virtual identity server. I'll go down to employees, and we'll pick on John Doe here. So all we have to do is right click, say new attribute. My attribute will be ABC my custom adder, and we'll say some data here, and we'll save it, and we will click off of it and come back on to John Doe, and you'll notice at the top there's the attribute ABC my custom adder. And if we scroll all the way over to the right, you'll notice that the source is VIS schema, and that's it.